Hello everyone, welcome to this first series of lectures, The Truth About TCM. The reason why I've put these lectures together is, as you know, at the INMI, the Institute of Natural Medicine Ireland, we are very keen on preserving classical medicine. It's also important to understand where traditional Chinese medicine has developed from. So this helps us to converse with those people who don't practice the same kind of medicine that we do here at the clinics. So, my name is Anthony Monteith. I've been involved in complementary medicine since 1994. I was formally qualified in 1997 as a sports injury therapist, and in the late 90s I began my training in Chinese medicine. I spent a lot of my time working with many different clients of many different types of clients over the last 18 years, and have in that period managed to train in Asia and the UK, Ireland, and various other countries. I'm really keen to impart information both from my training over the last few years. I'll also be including some information from some classical systems that I've been able and lucky enough to study with, and from there some of the philosophy and the attitudes related to that. So it'd be fairly informal. The idea is not to make it too read out like you're reading an ebook, because I know for some of you may find that quite boring. So without further ado, we shall crack on. So, what is the meaning of traditional Chinese medicine and the study of Chinese medicine? Well, for me, studying under guidance of a master is the most preferred method. Traditionally, pre the 1950s, all top students of Chinese medicine, both classical and conventional, had some kind of guidance from a master. And it was a tree of learning, so the main trunk would be the seat of the information, and the branches would be the various styles of medicine that come from that. For example, acupuncture, moxibustion, herbal therapies, qigong healing, and lots of other therapies besides that. The old classical texts are often referred to in the modern texts. And this was because with traditional Chinese medicine they had to pay respect to their ancestors and respect to the traditional or the classical methods that had helped to develop the medicine over the last few thousand years. Acupuncture was first mentioned in a lot of the folk stories. There was a lot of stories about moxibustion, which is the application of heat using a special herb. A lot of stories about fluids, draining fluids, pricking the body to drain stagnant blood. As we've moved on into modern society, of course, we've then tried to link acupuncture to some more modern criteria. In other words, we're now using the likes of MRI machines and neurocognitive machines to show that needling using, for example, acupuncture, it affects reflex reactions in the brain, and the brain actually understands where the needle is and is trying to react to it. From a naturopathic point of view, they like to think about acupuncture as producing super oxyodismutase. It's a bit of a mouthful, SOM for short, which is about 1,500 times more powerful than vitamin C, and it's produced naturally by the body to repair. So there has been key factors that show that acupuncture can increase SOM in the body. Typically, people that living in beyond the normal threshold of human civilization, such as the Tibetans, they would consume higher qualities of herbs and enzymes in their food, and they live in extreme environments and live to much longer ages than we would. And it's because they have a high level of this SOD. I invite you to look at the work of Sir Robert McAllison, who lived in India, and he researched that small quantities and qualities of highly nutritious food can extend your lifespan massively. Also, in relation to moxa, my own personal experience is not a lot of the old style acupuncturists and moxibustion practitioners would use direct moxa, which would cause scarring. But what we see now is that the third stage of healing, which is the removal of the scar, is just not happening anymore. And my belief from my training is that we are so deficient. Our body does not operate to the higher vibrations that it used to. So, Westerners think that acupuncture increases the level of reflex reactions in the brain, increases this level of SOD, and it produces an increase in the level of fluids to heal. Similar to when you fast and you increase the level of hormones in your body, which can create healing. Originally, stone needles were used. Now, when we talk about stone needles, I would gather we're probably talking more like crystals, different qualities of stone and jade. And these needles were more like a acupressure device, and they were held over certain areas of the body and proven to increase the level of the healing response in the body. Traditionally, most of the custodians of Chinese medicine were actually female, but as the structure of society in China changed, there was more push towards population, babies and motherhood took over. Most of the various cultures in China had some form of shamanism involving the removal of evil spirits, the promotion of good events in the community, and that was considered some of the earliest forms of medicine. As time went on, we then went into a period of masters and apprentices, and this kind of then developed into schools of medicine, because obviously as a business the government could intervene and create a way of earning revenue for the state. One of the most famous acupuncturists we talk about is Hua Tuo. It's believed, though we're uncertain, he lived about 150 years after the recorded Western idea of Christ's death. He was famous for operations using anesthesia. He used a special kind of herb to knock out the patient. He would remove cataracts from their eyes, perform some basic spinal surgery. He was also a master of Qigong. Unfortunately, he was banned, and the work that he did was banned also. So therefore, necessity being the mother of invention, the Chinese had therefore to keep their people healthy in other ways. So actually opening up bodies, cutting them open was a no-no. So the Chinese had to rely on a system of limited anatomy, yet keep the person healthy with no viewing of the body. Very formal. For example, the wrist diagnosis for the pulses is a classic development of not having to take off your clothes to judge what is going on internally in the body. The same as with tongue diagnosis, which was used to look at the body shape of the tongue. It's a reflection of the digestive system and blood flow into various organs of the body. You could also discern if the body was hot or cold, damp, phlegm, whether there was poor excretions. And all these two types of major diagnosis were then developed into what is more commonly known in TCM as the 8 principles. Generally speaking, as Chinese medicine evolved, if there was no response to the treatment by the patient, then generally the doctor would assume that the person's health was very, very bad. They had limited vitality to actually even heal themselves. Moving forward, we'll have a look at how things have developed in the last 200 or 300 years. In the 1800s in China, acupuncture was put in bad favor with the emperor, and Chinese medicine became more marginalized until 1950, when there was a resurgence. And as you know, there was a cultural revolution that occurred in the 1950s, pretty much driven by Chairman Mao Zedong. He reinstated a notion to commit to the use of what he coined as traditional Chinese medicine, which really was a merging of the classics and modern medicine. A lot of the esoteric, shamanistic folk practices were removed from this practice, and it was heavily governed, regulated, and shall we say, there was a lot of propaganda relating to how it was delivered. Now, during this time, because of the communist era, the Russians actually wanted to disprove that acupuncture worked, but they actually ended up adopting pretty much most of the systems of Chinese medicine. And the Americans were drawn to China through these demonstrations in the 1970s of acupuncture anesthesia. And so a lot of American journalists originally went to study, and obviously also American students of medicine. Their training was pretty limited. It was 3 to 6 months, and I would speculate that they probably spent a lot of that time just learning point actions, pulse diagnosis based more on the herbal medicine rather than on the acupuncture. In China, pharmaceuticals were pretty much disapproving of anything different. A classic story unrelated to this is Earnest T Krebs. I invite you to read about his life and what happened to him. It's a very, very sad story. And it's a story of how the pharmaceutical industry destroyed a man who'd stumbled upon quite an important discovery. Acupuncture did make its way to Europe very quickly. There has been recordings in France as early as the 1600s, possibly brought from missionaries who had a much higher level of education and language ability. In the 1960s in the West, we had a Contra-Revolution, which was what we call the Great Agriculture, where we started to promote food and the preservation of food and the canning and creating food types that are not, well, food that isn't food, generally speaking. And as we move forward, there were people realizing that people were getting very, very sick. And there's been a few famous names in traditional Chinese medicine, one such as Giovanni Maccioccia, which is famous. You can get any of his books online. He went in the early 80s and studied in Nanjing College. And Nanjing was one of those first real places to really have a good system of getting foreigners in. And I believe the reason why TCM is still alive is because that Westerners are paying to keep those hospitals going. So that concludes this chapter. Moving forward, we'll take a little bit more time to discuss some of the basics of philosophy. Take care. Talk to you soon.